Hello and welcome back to this video on creating a trim sheet. What we're going to do first, we're just going to change the settings here from centimeter to meter, just so we're working in the right scale. And then we're going to import just the mannequin. It's not necessarily needed, but it's just sort of second nature for me to do it. So we're just going to start off by creating a plane. This is going to be the base of our trim sheet. I normally like to work with these 2 meters by 2 meters. Just turn down the width and the height and snap the pivot to the corner here. D and V, bring it to the corner. And I'm just going to rotate this up and put it beside our scale reference. Now why I'm doing this is that I just want to line up certain heights of the trim sheet to the player. Or because we're going to create a wood paneling trim sheet. So I just want it to be the right height. I'm just going to start by connecting this. This is going to be the bottom section of our trim sheet. And you want your edges all to be on the grid because it helps with snapping with your mesh as well. You're snapping the UV maps to it. So maybe bring this down a bit. Yeah, kind of like waist height for this sort of paneling. So just making sure that's on the grid. It's roughly the right size that I'm wanting. So we're just going to create our second section of the trim sheet. This is going to be sort of like a middle paneling skirting board almost. So this I only really need to take up one maybe 10 centimeters, which is one square. Again, the sort of secret is to make sure the lines are on the grid. You know that then you know the sections are all equal and they will snap together properly on the grid. So because it's 2 meters, it's 20 squares. Excellent. So just gonna move this over here. Bring this back down. Right, the sort of square pollen I want on the bottom is gonna be 4 sections. So four divided by 20. You're gonna have 5 each. 5 every 5 centimeters is gonna be a line. So 4 times 5 is 20. That way I know the squares are all equally sized and will sort of scale perfectly. So I have this sort of bottom sections layered out on the grid here. So I'm just going to start by creating it. So what we're going to do is we're going to create our paneling on top of our trim sheet base, and generally these are called like floaters because they're like sort of floating detail that you bake onto the map. This is sort of like the general principle of trim sheets. You're getting this sort of free detail for very little geometry detail. So it's just a flat plane, so it's very useful for like maybe mobile games, or a lot of older games use them too. Nowadays they're maybe not as utilized as much anymore. A lot of games tend to go for just sort of the texture is quite different. They kind of go for like tileable masks and tileable textures and word align textures, so they don't really have to create trim sheets as much. But they're still a very valuable skill to learn because they could be useful for mobile games where there's a lot of budget restrictions on memory and things. So if you can make a really effective trim sheet, then it could go a long way. This I haven't. This trim sheet's quite basic, but it's good for just learning the core skills. What I'm creating here is I'm just creating the sort of basic paneling that I want on the wall, that I want on the texture. Sorry, so this can be as detailed as you want. Um, I'm just trying to bevel the edges here just to make them nice and smooth for whenever I smooth them. Off the chamfer here and just increase the segments. This can be as high poly as you want it because it's all being baked down anyway, so this won't affect the poly count of the trim sheet. So I'm just going to snap these beside each other because they're on the grid. They should snap perfectly, exactly 4, and that way it will repeat seamlessly. So that's our first section done. Not too shabby. Sort of making sure that they all align, but it all should be good because they're within the grid, so there shouldn't be any real issues with this. Now for the next section, see, I'm just double checking here that these are all lined on the grid, but it's all good. Making sure I was still recording. Right, so I think I'm going to move on to the middle section of the trim sheet. And for this section, I want to create more of like a skirting board, picture reel type sort of shape to sort of go around the middle section. It can go around the middle section of your environment. So I'm just going to create something that I've made last time. So I have the outline here of a skirting board like this, and create this sort of we can import this into the I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but we can import these images as a flat plane that we can use as like to trace around. So I'm just sort of trying to scale this down so that it's the right size for that section of the trim sheet. I was trying to snap it to the grid, but with these image planes, they don't have any vertices, so they're just you can't snap anything to the you can't snap anything. It just snaps to the grid. It's gonna do this by eye. But it doesn't need to be perfect just now because I can just fix it later. I'm just slowly trying to line this up. Let's bring this over to the edge here. So I know that this is roughly spot on the trim line edge here. I'm just going to use a CV curve and just create a rough outline. I can, again, doesn't have to be perfect, because we can always just fix it afterwards. So I've created that now. I'll just remove this, I don't need it anymore. And just reset the transforms and stuff on this so it's pivots in the center and just rotate it around. Now I can snap this vertex and make sure it's right on the edge. Boom. Perfect. So now that this is on the edge, it makes it a bit easier. Because we know it'll be seamless now once I start to make it. I had some minor camera issues. I had a button that did something to my cameras. I was just trying to work that out. It's quite annoying. You're getting real time problem solving in these videos. So I'll just put it back to perspective camera. So I'll just scale this up till it's right on the edge here. And see the sort of curves going going through the mesh. We don't really want that, so just try and bring this back up. Control vertex. Just sort of maneuver that up, and just sort of fix the shapes a bit. Trying to align them as best as you can with the edge. Just scale them in so they're nice and flat. And then just fix this edge here. Again, just scale them flat. Alright, that looks pretty good. I'm just going to duplicate this. Shift D, duplicate that, click on both of them, go up to surfaces, and then go to loft, very top issue, very top action there, and that'll create the shape in between the two curves. And we're just going to go to the geometry section here. Never found it. There we go, polygon count. Just turn this down. We don't need that many. Just 500 maybe. It's fine. I think maybe I bumped it up a bit more. Yeah. And then, just like last time, just get rid of all these vertical edge loops. We don't need these. You see the mesh is black here because the normals are messed up. What I'll do is they're very easy fix. We'll just click on the mesh and then go to surfaces, or sorry, mesh display, and hit reverse. That'll just reverse the normals, face normals, so that they're facing the correct way. And what I'll do now is just make sure that move this edge out, and then make sure that vertices are on the grid here. So hold an X and snap this right to the end of the grid. So I know that this is perfectly on the grid now. And then this section will be, there you go, that'll be perfectly on the edge too. So this will repeat seamlessly for our trim sheet. Just gonna drag this edge down here. So I'm just gonna chamfer or bevel these edges so that they are a bit harder whenever they're smoothed. Although I think I chamfered it too much and kind of looks weird, like hard edges, some hard edges that we don't want. So just undo that and just sort of give it a lesser bevel. So that looks alright. So that's the middle section of the trim sheet created. We're halfway there. For this third section, I want to create a kind of square paneling. I'm just going to separate this. Although in hindsight, it didn't work out as perfectly as I intended to, just because of the amount of space left on the grid. I wanted the squares to be perfectly even. So here I'm trying to just snap these lines to the grid here. And this is just me going through the process of trying to figure out how I want these edge lines to work. I think maybe I should have just stuck to two, because then they would have been even. But I wanted more like a difference from the very bottom panel section, so I just think I went with two. But in hindsight, I should have kept the edges on the grid, because it makes it easier for when you're UV mapping to snap things so that they repeat without seams. I spent quite a bit of time figuring this out, and I should have just left it. So I think now I move on to actually creating the square bracket shape for the trim sheet. So again, just start off with the basic square, and we're just going to snap the corner vertex here. We're going to create the frame for the outside sections of this frame, because we know they're going to repeat. If I make the width of it 1 meter, then when it repeats, each edge, the starting edge and ending edge is going to be 1 meter each. So that's going to be 2 meters. So that won't really look right. So on the end sections of your trim sheet, you want to try and make them half, so that when they line up, they'll still be a meter. That way that it seems seamless. It appears seamless. Sorry. It's one of the mistakes I made early on when I started creating trim sheets. Is you have to think about how it stacks up whenever it's repeated a lot. So you really, if you spend a bit of time work out how it repeats a lot, then you can sort of figure out these issues you might come across. So I'm just creating this middle section here. And so duplicate this up, create the sort of side bracket. You can see that I'm trying to just keep half of it outside, so that you only have the inside 50 centimeters. That way I know when I repeat it, it's going to be the correct size each way. I think I just drag this up. Holding an X to snap on the grid, remember? So I'm just gonna duplicate this. Again, you want to just have this snapped in on this side too. V to snap vertices. So I'll just duplicate that back over, bring it over, and then kind of just observing it. Just take this face here and bring it in, just so that it's not sticking out further than it needs to be. Again, just making sure everything's on the grid. Like I wanted to do that for the top sections, but that wouldn't have worked out. So it's just keep them the way they are. And then this next section is me trying to figure out how many squares I want. I think this section of the trim sheet I probably could have spent some more time on, just to finesse it. Um, but as a sort of beginner introduction to trim sheets, it's not too bad. Just sort of learn the overall workflow. What you're essentially doing is taking a flat plane and baking the details onto it with a higher polygon sort of square above it to sort of fake these details. Um, and they're useful. Like I said, they're perfect for sort of lower, maybe like mobile games. I think we use trim sheets a lot when you want to focus on performance. Um, I know World of Warcraft uses them as well. Some of the last stylized games use trim sheets too, because they can be very efficient for memory. You're reusing the same texture a lot, so it's very efficient for GPU memory. But I would hazard a guess that a lot more studios are moving away from them in favor of just different texture methods. Consoles and PCs can handle a lot more than what they used to, so it's okay to use higher res textures and things. A lot of things can have unique bakes and stuff. Um, a lot of materials they may be moving towards more just like material shaders with word aligned textures. Instead of having to create these trim sheets, they just have these materials that they can scale as much as they want. And they have a lot of extra shader parameters that they can change, like the dirt and the grime and the color. That's why Substance Designer can be pretty useful. You can actually create trim sheets inside Substance Designer. It's a bit more technical than what I'm used to doing. I've never made a trim sheet inside Substance Designer, but I know it can be done, and it can be done a lot more precisely than just modeling it out the way I'm doing it right now. This is the way I'm doing it is probably a bit more classic than what can be done now with trim sheets. But it is good for a general oversight into how they work and how you can make one. So what you're seeing here is I'm just sort of found the amount of squares I want to have. To make it look even. Again, just bring this face in so that it's all within the square, the 2 meter square. So I'm pretty happy with that. How it's turned out. Not too shabby. Haven't made a trim sheet in a long time. This is the first time I made one in quite some time. So what I want to do now is just um, give these squares this mesh some bevels so that they have nice sharp, nice smooth edges for when I bake it down. I have to do it individually. So you'll just sort of see me going through this process. Turn off the chamfer and turn the fraction down a bit, just so that it doesn't bevel too much. Same again for this one. Just keep them all consistent so that the bevel looks consistent whenever it's smoothed out. You can hit 3 to preview the smooth. You can hit 3 to preview your smooth mesh, and hit 1 to bring it back to normal. So I'm just working my way through these meshes here. That one didn't work because there's a mesh inside it, but the easy way to fix this is I was just looking at the beveled edge here. It looks pretty nice. So how I'm going to fix this is just Alt H to hide everything but it, and just merge these vertices together. That way the mesh, the face inside it will combine with it. So it should bevel a lot easier now without any issues. I'm just going to copy and paste these over. For the high poly section of the trim sheet, you don't need to do any UV mapping. It's not necessary because we're literally only interested in the normal map data. So you don't have to worry about doing any UV maps for this high poly section. Just deleting the non-beveled versions. Again, just duplicate this over, but snap it to the vertices so that it's on the exact edge we need it to be. Just make sure that's the correct edge. So it's not perfect, so just bring it down this vertice and then just snap it. V for snapping, V for vertex, V for vertex snapping. So that's the high poly shape created for the trim sheet. You might think of a different shape for yours, but this is just the kind of basic one that I went for. I'm just going to combine these freeze transforms and all that jazz and smooth it out. It will only need one subdivision. My computer lagged out here because I brought it up too high, but just bring it down to one. So now you see the sort of smooth meshes for the trim sheet. I'm just trying to line up some of the edge loops on the trim sheet here, although I don't think it was really necessary. That's the main section of the trim sheet created. Just going to rename this trim sheet HP for high poly. And then the actual trim sheet section that we're going to use, we'll call it trim sheet low poly. So we're just going to freeze transforms and all that jazz and then export this for baking in Substance Painter. Just have to get through my terrible folder structure first. We'll just call this trim sheet. And before you export the low poly, we have to UV map this section, but because it's a plane, just you can just create a planar UV map, and it should be perfect. And then just click layout to make it fill the UV space. So that's perfect. And just freeze transforms and delete history. And export this as a trim sheet LP for low poly. So we're just going to open up our Substance Painter here. I'm just going to select our low poly mesh. So here we see we just have our plane, and we're going to bake the maps now. So we'll just import our high poly. You get a lot of red arrows here, so we're just going to increase the frontal distance. That means it sort of looks for higher above it to sort of bake the details in. You want all blue, and increase this anti-alias into 16. Turn off the ID map. That way, and we start baking. You see the detail coming through from the higher poly. There we have it. We have our baked baked trim sheet. There are some errors in the baking. I think they're from the wood intersecting, but it's not too much of an issue. So we're just going to jump straight into the texturing, and okay, start with just a wood texture here because I want my stuff to be wooden. You may have different wooden textures, but this is just what I've done. So we want to make sure, just crease this tail in a wee bit. Turn off the height because it may be a bit noisy. Keep the normal map on. Create a black map because I just want this section to be for the middle trim skirting board section. I was kind of worrying that I laid it out wrong with the edge loops, but I think I was just thinking too much about it. You see me here trying to work out if I've done the edge loop correctly, but I have. I'll just go back into Substance Painter here. Yeah, figure out this is actually correct. So just start building down that sort of this basic layer first. That way we can get a look for, feel for what we want to do. Again, just change the tail in a bit, get more detail, and change the rotation of the wood grain. That way, it's always good to figure out your wood grain. It just adds an extra level of realism to your material. You can see here the normal data we've got. There's all that detail on a plane, which is really good. The sort of top section didn't work out as perfectly as I imagined it, but Um, for a tutorial, it's not too bad. It's just an issue with baking the sort of wooden bars over each other created sort of ambient occlusion issue. Yeah, I was just building up this texture in here like you would any other model you would texture. Just using different wood grains here just to really help sell it. And the good thing about these trim sheets is that you can create different variations of them as well in terms of the textures, so you can really get a lot of variety out of them. And for not a lot of memory intensity. I'm just duplicating this texture and making sure that the wood grain's correct. It's more horizontal. Just what we want. So just gonna start creating some grunge and wear and tear on the trim sheet here. The secret is you have to try and be as subtle as possible, because when you start to repeat this texture a lot, you'll notice the repeatingness of the grime. So you really have to try and be subtle as possible. It's a fine balance to get, but you know you can figure it out easily. I'm just sort of playing about with the how much grunge I want on the wood here. I like to just kind of make it look a bit whiter, so it looks like the wood's been chipped away at. But again, trying to just keep it subtle. I think I'll just add this sort of this grime and dirt and stuff to these layers as well. You can see here it's I'm just trying to troubleshoot what's wrong with my mesh. And once I untick the normal map, the issues go away. So it's kind of an issue with the baking of the meshes together. Still don't really know how I would fix it, but it's maybe just something to do with how it intersected the wood on the high poly mesh. I'll just turn this down because it's lagging my computer out a wee bit. Let's try and keep the color consistent. Yeah, these are just things that I'm doing. Like you're you're completely of your own choice to make whatever textures you want on yours. I just think doing like wooden paneling makes good sense for a trim sheet, because they look like trim sheets in real life, honestly. I'm just going to add some cavity rust into the meshes here just to give it a bit of depth. Again, you have to be quite subtle. I want this to be like almost look like dust or just a bit of dirt in the edges. But I only want it one section, so I'll just do a new folder and then mask that out and just add it to the bottom section and the middle section, it seems. Well, maybe even the bottom section of the. Yeah, I just don't want it in the sort of squares area here. I'm going to add the ambient occlusion map trick, so add an ambient occlusion to a color layer and click on multiply. If you're putting in a folder, make sure the folder is set to multiply, because it also won't work. And there's some issues here with these black squares, but we can just mask those out and paint it away. So I'll just get a shape here, square shape. Just sort of just click the dark bits away. And I realized I could just do this because it's not affecting the other layers, so I just got rid of that pretty quickly. So that is my trim sheet created. Again, just put this on Studio Tomoko. It's the nicest looking HDRI, and then turn up the specular quality and the AO intensity. Although I should have done that at the start, but it's okay. So I was quite happy with that. There's some issues at the top, but the bottom half section definitely looks great. So I'm just going to export this now and bring it into Unreal Engine. Make this 4K, export this as Unreal Engine 4 packed, and make it PNGs. Just save this to trim sheet and export. Before I put it in Unreal Engine, actually, I'm going to go to Maya and create a basic mesh just to show you how you can UV map something with your trim sheet. So I'll just we'll create a cube here. Actually, no, wait, I'm going to click on plane instead. The great thing about trim sheets is that because you're not having to worry about UVs as much, you can make them, you can make your UVs as long as you want because it's already been pre-made. And if it tiles correctly, then you can really just go wild with how far you take your UVs with it. I'll just UV map this quickly. Normally, when you're doing unique bakes, on trim sheet stuff, you want your UVs to be within the 0 to 1 range. But because we're not worried about that, it can overstretch and it'll just tile. It should tile seamlessly. So I'll just create a basic material here. And then color file, add color texture, add a file, image name, and then just find our trim sheet. Again, terrible filing system I have, so I struggle to find things sometimes. So we'll just bring in our color map. Hit 6 to bring up to show textures, and click on that wee image icon and the check untick the checker icon. So now we can see our trim sheet, and we can UV map snap to the grid. Because these certain elements were made on the grid too, we can snap them perfectly to the grid. So now if we were to extend this mesh out, if we were to do this, it would look a bit weird because it's really small, but it would work. It would still be seamless. And we'll just keep that there. Then we want to go up, add this top section here. Let's create a planar map and just rotate this. We can just bring this out, stretch it as much as we want, and then fix the UVs accordingly. So this you can see how powerful trim sheets can be when you spend a bit of time setting them up, and how effective they can be for creating environments. So I was just deciding on how much squares I wanted to have for this particular mesh. So I was quite happy with that. So we're just gonna, for the last bit, I'm just gonna bring in the Unreal Engine 5 just to show you what it looks like when it's fully in the engine. So we're just gonna reset the material here and export this. Open up our Resi save room folder. Make sure we're still recording. So just load up our save room, and then we'll just import everything we have. Import all. Remember to go on your AORM map and untick sRGB. You always need to do that for your meshes to your textures to look correct. So we're just going to create our material, just simple material. Drag our textures in. Goes into base color. This goes into normal map. Red channel ambient occlusion, green channel roughness, blue channel metallic. Always the same. Save this up. Click on the mesh and add the texture to it. So we drag it in now, then rotate this, we can see our trim sheet in action, and it looks pretty good. Looks pretty good in an engine here. The bottom two halves are pretty have worked pretty well. The top section hasn't worked as well as I imagined it would, which is a shame. But you know, for like a learning purpose, it's actually turned out overall pretty good. And you can see the sort of detail with the normal maps. You can see these look like actual modelled panels. But we know the secret, and that it's actually just a plane. So trim sheets can still look pretty good. You can definitely fake a lot of detail with them, and they are a good skill to have because you might be asked to make one if you ever have it. If you're ever in a company, definitely useful for mobile games. You can just see me messing about it right here, and if you go side on, you can know it's just flat. So yes, that's the creating a basic trim sheet and importing it into Unreal Engine. So if you ever have any questions, just message me and let me know. Thanks.